I suspected my wife of cheating, confronted her, and discovered a shocking truth that turned my entire week upside down. I first noticed it on a mundane Tuesday evening. She had stayed late at work, again, and when I called her, her voice sounded different, polite, clipped, but with a subtle hesitation that made me frown. Why the pause? I thought, twisting the phone cord in my hand. She claimed it was just another late meeting, but something about the tone didn't sit right. The next morning, over breakfast, I caught a glimpse of a text popping up on her phone. It was from someone named Ethan, a name I hadn't heard before. The preview read something harmless enough. See you tomorrow. But my chest tightened. Why was it her phone buzzed constantly, with messages disappearing almost as soon as they appeared? My mind started spinning, imagining scenarios I didn't want to admit that I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it's just work. But the little things added up. The way she checked her phone when I entered the room, the quick smile that seemed meant to hide something. I started noticing details I'd never paid attention to. A hand brushing hair nervously. A slight hesitation when she laughed at a joke I didn't hear by the end of the day. The suspicion had taken root, subtle but persistent. I felt a chill when I remembered our conversation from the weekend, the way she had avoided talking about a casual Friday evening plan. My stomach twisted. Could she be hiding something? The thought made me uneasy, but I also felt the tug of caution. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't let paranoia ruin what we have. Yet the seed of doubt was planted, and it grew quietly, like a shadow stretching across the corners of my mind. Every text, every call, every little smile or pause became a puzzle I felt compelled to solve. I was caught between trusting her and investigating, between love and fear. And I knew this was only the beginning. The next few days were a blur of half-truths and small contradictions. She would tell me one thing about where she had been, and later, tiny inconsistencies would nag at me. A coffee shop she popped into suddenly became a different one. A coworker she mentioned seemed to have vanished from her stories, and the timelines didn't quite line up that I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she's just forgetful or stressed, but the nagging feeling refused to go away. Every time she glanced at her phone, I felt my stomach tighten, imagining messages I wasn't meant to see. I caught myself analyzing her every gesture. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear a fraction too quickly. The small smirk she would hide when reading a text point one evening. I decided to bring it up gently. Hey, you mentioned grabbing coffee with Jenna yesterday. Did you end up going somewhere else instead? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She paused, just for a moment, and then smiled tightly. Oh, I just changed plans at the last minute. Nothing important. That nothing important didn't land right. My mind raced with questions, some rational, some absurd. Why the sudden change? Why the hesitation? Why the tight smile? I wanted to press further, but I held back, fearing I might overstep or sound paranoid. Still, I couldn't ignore the puzzle pieces that no longer fit together. Over the next days, every story she told seemed to unravel slightly under scrutiny. Little discrepancies, small oddities, each one feeding the quiet voice in my head whispering that something wasn't right. I felt torn, between trusting the woman I loved and the gnawing suspicion that I was being kept in the dark by the end of the week. My anxiety had escalated. I found myself checking her social media, noting who she interacted with, and wondering why the simplest explanations didn't satisfy me. Am I imagining this? Or is there really something I'm missing? The line between paranoia and legitimate concern blurred, and I realized I was teetering on the edge of obsession. Unable to let go of the questions that refused to leave my mind, it happened on a quiet Thursday evening. I was tidying up the living room while she was in the kitchen, humming softly to herself, and that's when I noticed it. A small envelope sticking out from under the edge of the couch cushion. My heart skipped a beat as I pulled it out. It was addressed to her, in handwriting I didn't recognize. I hesitated, the rational part of me screaming not to pry. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe I'm reading too much into this. But curiosity and fear won. I opened it slowly. Inside were several photographs of her with a man I hadn't met. They were just casual snapshots. A coffee shop, laughing on a park bench, hands brushing in ways that felt intimate. My stomach twisted into knots that I sank into the couch, staring at the pictures. My mind raced. Who is he? What does this mean? Am I being blind? Or is this betrayal? The room felt smaller, every shadow suddenly suspicious. I could hear her moving around in the kitchen, completely unaware of my discovery, humming a song that suddenly felt like mockery. The flood of questions overwhelmed me. Why didn't she tell me? How long has this been going on? I forced myself to breathe, trying to separate imagination from reality. Maybe there was an innocent explanation, a work project, a friend she hadn't mentioned, but the evidence felt damning. Every laugh in the photos, every subtle touch seemed to confirm the worst fears my mind could conjure. When she finally walked into the living room, I had to act normal, hiding the envelope under the cushion. "Hey, want some tea?" she asked, smiling. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. But inside, I was a storm of anxiety, betrayal, and confusion. I wanted answers, but the thought of confronting her without full clarity terrified me. That night, I barely slept. Every sound, every notification from her phone sent my heart racing. I replayed the photos over and over in my mind, trying to make sense of them. And somewhere between fear and disbelief, a decision formed. I needed to find out the truth, one way or another. The discovery had opened a door I could never close. Whether my suspicions were justified or my mind was running wild, I knew nothing would ever feel the same. Trust had shifted into fragile territory, and every interaction from this point on carried the weight of uncertainty. The next day, I couldn't focus on anything else. Work, friends, even casual tasks felt meaningless compared to the weight pressing on my chest. I found myself thinking of every recent interaction with her, every glance and word, trying to pick apart what I might have missed. The photographs from the envelope kept replaying in my mind, twisting with every possible interpretation that I decided I had to know more, but I had to be careful. I didn't want to confront her blindly, not yet. So I started observing her patterns, the subtle rhythms of her life that had once seemed mundane. I noticed the late nights at work that didn't quite add up, the vague mentions of coffee with colleagues that didn't match the actual times or locations, and the tiny nervous gestures when she received texts. That I even started checking social media, not obsessively at first, just casually scrolling to see who she interacted with. That's when I noticed Ethan again, the man from the photos. He wasn't just a random coworker. He appeared frequently in comments, tagged in stories, often in posts she liked within seconds. My chest tightened with a mix of dread and curiosity. Every notification from her phone made my pulse race that I tried to analyze without emotion, but that proved impossible. Every innocent explanation seemed less convincing. Every coincidence felt deliberate. My thoughts oscillated wildly. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's a secret project, a friend in trouble. Or maybe, I couldn't finish that sentence aloud. Even to myself, by evening, I had started piecing together a timeline from scattered posts, pictures, and hints. I noticed patterns, meetings that coincided with the work late, excuse, lunch photos with a stranger I didn't recognize, a few subtle messages that disappeared too quickly. I felt like a detective chasing shadows, desperate for clarity but terrified of what I might uncover. Yet, alongside the fear, there was a strange thrill, the hunt for truth. I was drawn into the small details, the way she laughed on calls, the way her eyes shifted when she glanced at her phone, the tiny changes in routine that suddenly seemed monumental. My mind ran through every scenario, innocent, suspicious, catastrophic. Each possibility felt equally likely. That night, I sat alone, staring at the ceiling, my hands trembling slightly. I realized I was on a dangerous edge. The line between careful observation and obsession was blurring. And yet, I couldn't stop. I needed confirmation, a truth I could either confront or reconcile with, before the uncertainty consumed me entirely. By the middle of the week, my mind had become a battlefield. Every small inconsistency, every fleeting gesture she made, seemed magnified tenfold. I found myself questioning everything. Her words, her tone, even the way she brewed her morning coffee. Was this all innocent, or had I been blind for months? Even mundane events felt loaded with hidden meaning. A smile shared with a stranger on the street, a lingering glance at her phone while texting, each sparked a cascade of possibilities. My heart would tighten as I imagined conversations she might be having behind my back. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was creating monsters from shadows, but the doubts refused to fade. At work, I became distracted. My colleagues noticed my absent-mindedness, my constant checking of my phone, my preoccupation with every notification. When a friend asked if everything was okay, I muttered a vague, just stressed, and forced a smile. Inside, though, the gears of suspicion were grinding relentlessly. That evening, I attempted a casual check-in. "So, how was your meeting with Ethan today?" I asked, trying to sound neutral. She froze for the briefest second, just a flicker, before replying. "It was fine, just work stuff. Nothing exciting." Her tone was calm, but that tiny hesitation stabbed at my already fragile trust that I knew the danger of spiraling further, but I couldn't help it. I started replaying old conversations in my head, dissecting every word, every laugh, every pause. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe she's completely innocent. But what if she isn't? The uncertainty gnawed at me, making every moment tense and every interaction a potential clue or trap. By the end of the day, my doubts had multiplied to the point where I couldn't differentiate between evidence and paranoia. Even when she was sitting right in front of me, smiling or talking, I found myself scanning for signs, reading hidden meanings into the smallest gestures. It was exhausting, yet I couldn't stop. The need for clarity had taken control, and with each passing hour, I felt the grip of suspicion tighten like a vice around my chest. Sleep came fitfully that night, with dreams tangled in shadowy scenarios of betrayal and guilt. And through it all, a single thought repeated in my mind. I have to know the truth, whatever it costs, that I couldn't take it any longer. That evening, I decided to confront her, not angrily, not with accusations, but carefully, trying to sound calm. I told myself, keep it neutral. Ask, don't accuse. Just understand. She was in the living room, curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone, a soft hum on her lips. I swallowed my anxiety and sat down across from her. "Hey, can we talk for a minute?" My voice wavered slightly despite my efforts to sound steady. "Sure," she said, setting her phone aside. There was a faint tension in her shoulders, but nothing I could read with certainty. "I've noticed, some things lately," I started. "Like, you've been hanging out with Ethan a lot. And some of the stories don't quite line up." I tried to keep my tone light, almost casual, but my heart was hammering. She blinked, her smile faltering just slightly. "Oh, those?" she said. "It's really nothing, just work stuff. He's a colleague, and we've been collaborating on a project." I nodded slowly, forcing myself to remain calm, though every word sounded rehearsed in my head. "I get that, but some of the other things, like the messages and the late nights, I can't help but feel worried. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I also can't ignore it." She leaned back, crossing her arms, her eyes studying me intently. "I didn't realize it was bothering you this much," she said quietly. "I promise, there's nothing going on. I understand why it looks suspicious, but it's all professional." Her words should have reassured me. Part of me wanted to believe her entirely, to breathe a sigh of relief and let the fear go. But another part, the part that had been watching every gesture, every glance, every hidden message, wasn't convinced yet. Am I reading too much into this? Or is there really something beneath the surface? We sat in silence for a long moment, the tension palpable. I wanted to ask more, to dig deeper, but I forced myself to stop. I didn't want this to turn into an argument, not yet. Instead, I said, "Okay, I just needed to say how I feel. Can we just be honest with each other? No secrets." She nodded, a faint smile returning, but I noticed the flicker of unease in her eyes. It wasn't proof of guilt, I told myself, just the natural response to a serious conversation. Still, my heart refused to settle. The confrontation hadn't solved anything. It had only intensified the questions swirling in my mind, and deep down, I knew this was far from over. The days that followed were torture. I tried to go about my routine, but every small detail kept pulling me back into the spiral of doubt. I found myself double-checking her schedule, noticing every call, every text notification, and every sudden change in plans. I wanted to trust her, I truly did. But the mind has a way of feeding on uncertainty. One afternoon, I stumbled upon something unexpected. A receipt for a restaurant neither of us had ever been to together. The date matched one of her supposed late-night work meetings. My first reaction was panic. She was out there with him, wasn't she? But then, just as quickly, another explanation flickered through my mind. Maybe it's for a colleague, or someone else entirely. Maybe I'm overreacting. Then there were the photos on her phone, innocuous enough at first glance. A smiling Ethan standing beside her at a corporate event, their arms brushing casually. In one picture, she had her hand on his shoulder. My chest tightened. Every logical part of me wanted to see it as harmless, but my heart screamed betrayal that I tried to confront the evidence with reason. Maybe they were just friendly. Maybe she was helping him with a stressful situation. Maybe it wasn't romantic at all. But each mental justification seemed weaker than the last. Even her casual laughter while recounting mundane work stories began to feel layered with hidden meanings that I found myself watching her more closely than ever. How she answered calls, how she laughed at messages, even the way she walked across the room. It all became suspect. And yet, sometimes, I'd see her genuine smile when she looked at me, and part of me wanted to let go of the fear that IT was exhausting, walking this tightrope between doubt and trust. My mind was constantly churning, alternating between imagining worst-case scenarios and searching for innocent explanations. The conflicting evidence wasn't just external. It was my own interpretation, my perception twisting reality into something unrecognizable. By the end of the week, I realized I was living in two parallel worlds. One where I feared betrayal at every turn, and another where I desperately clung to the hope that everything was normal. And the most frightening part? I didn't know which world was real. I knew I couldn't keep spiraling alone, so I reached out to my closest friend, Mark. Over beers at a quiet bar, I tried to keep my voice casual, though my hands fidgeted nervously. Man, I don't know what's going on, I admitted. I've been noticing some things with Sarah, and I can't tell if I'm overreacting or if something's actually wrong. Mark raised an eyebrow. Overreacting how? He asked, leaning back and swirling his drink that I explained the late nights, the disappearing messages, the strange smiles, the envelope with the photos. Every word felt heavy, like dumping bricks onto the table between us. Mark listened carefully, nodding, occasionally sipping his drink. Dude, that does sound sketchy, he said finally. But you've got to be careful. You don't want to accuse her unfairly. I knew he was right, yet hearing him acknowledge that something might be off both comforted and terrified me. I wanted validation for my fears, yet part of me dreaded what that validation might mean. After the bar, we walked outside. The night air was cool, but it did little to calm my mind. Mark tried to offer advice. Maybe you should watch for patterns, not just one-off things. Or talk to her openly. But be careful. You don't want to destroy trust over assumptions. I nodded, knowing he was offering good advice, yet I felt like I was already in too deep. Each friend I confided in added a new layer of tension. Some urged caution, others suggested I confront her directly. The conflicting opinions mirrored the chaos in my own head, making it harder to separate fact from fear. Even later that night, lying in bed, I could still hear Mark's words echoing. Patterns, not paranoia, talk openly, but carefully. And yet, my mind couldn't stop replaying the images, the small gestures, the hidden messages. I felt like I was walking through a fog, unsure if I was hunting for truth or chasing shadows. By the end of the evening, my confusion had deepened. My friends' opinions had only intensified the storm inside me, leaving me torn between suspicion, hope, and fear. Every rational thought collided with an emotional torrent that I couldn't control, and I realized that whatever happened next, nothing would feel the same. By the time Friday rolled around, I felt like I was unraveling. Every little detail she did, the way she laughed at a joke on her phone, the way her eyes darted when a notification came in, was magnified in my mind. I couldn't focus at work. My thoughts constantly drifting back to her, to Ethan, to the photographs, and to the tiny inconsistencies I'd observed over the past week. I found myself replaying every interaction from the previous months. Had I missed signs? Was I blind all this time? The doubts gnawed at me relentlessly, eroding my confidence and clouding my judgment. Am I overreacting, or am I right to feel this way? The line between paranoia and legitimate concern blurred, leaving me anxious and sleepless. When she texted me about dinner plans, my stomach twisted. I couldn't help but imagine her laughing with him instead, sharing private jokes I wasn't supposed to hear. I paced the apartment, replaying the photographs over and over, scrutinizing every smile, every touch, every seemingly innocent gesture. My mind was a storm of fear, anger, and longing, all at once that I tried to distract myself, picking up a book, watching a show, scrolling mindlessly through social media. Nothing worked. Every attempt at normalcy felt hollow, like a thin veil over the gnawing uncertainty inside me. Even when I heard her voice in the next room, I felt a pang of distrust. Am I imagining this, or is something really happening? By late evening, the spiral had reached its peak. I was exhausted, trembling slightly, yet unable to sleep. My mind ran through scenarios, some realistic, some absurd, of betrayal, confrontation, and heartbreak. I questioned my own perception, wondering if my fears were the result of paranoia or intuition. The doubt had become a living, breathing presence in the apartment, one I couldn't escape. And yet, amid the chaos, a strange determination emerged. I needed clarity. I had to uncover the truth, no matter how painful or awkward it might be. The emotional spiral had pushed me to the edge, but it had also sharpened my resolve. Whatever was happening, I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to find answers, or risk losing not only my trust but myself in the process. Saturday morning brought a clarity I hadn't anticipated, though it came wrapped in chaos. I was cleaning the living room when I noticed a small, folded note tucked under her laptop. My heart skipped a beat as I reached for it, hands trembling. Opening it, I found a single message, scrawled in hurried handwriting. I didn't want you to find out this way. I need to tell you in person. Please trust me tonight. My stomach churned. Tonight? What is she hiding? For a brief moment, I panicked, imagining every worst-case scenario I had spun over the past week. But then another thought hit me. Maybe it wasn't what I feared. Maybe this was the truth, finally coming out. Hours dragged by until evening, every tick of the clock amplifying my anxiety. When she finally arrived home, I could see the tension etched across her face. She avoided my gaze at first, setting down her bag carefully, then looked at me with eyes that were both nervous and earnest. "We need to talk," she said, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, motioning to the couch. She sat, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I know you've been suspicious, and I understand why," she began. "But there's something you need to know before you jump to conclusions." My pulse raced. "Go on," I said, struggling to keep my voice calm. She took a deep breath. "Ethan, he's not. I mean, we aren't. There's nothing romantic going on. He's my brother's friend. We've been planning a surprise for you, a project at work you're supposed to be part of. I wasn't allowed to tell you yet, and I didn't know how to explain it without it sounding suspicious." Relief and disbelief collided in my chest. My mind spun. The late nights, the messages, the photos, they were all part of a well-meaning plan, not betrayal. My knees nearly gave out as I processed it, emotions whirling between guilt, relief, and lingering tension. I don't know what to say," I muttered. I thought you were." My voice faltered. She reached out, placing a hand over mine. "I get why you felt that way, but it's all been about a surprise. Nothing else. I promise." For the first time in a week, I felt my chest unclench. The storm of suspicion had passed, replaced by a mix of shame for doubting her and gratitude for her honesty. Yet, I also knew that trust, once shaken, took time to fully rebuild. This revelation was a beginning, not an end. The next few days were a delicate dance of reassurance and openness. I realized that even though the revelation had cleared the air, the lingering doubt in my mind wouldn't vanish overnight. Trust, once fractured, demanded patience, honesty, and consistent actions that we started small. I made a conscious effort to communicate without suspicion, asking about her day with genuine interest instead of veiled questions. She, in turn, was patient, answering honestly and sharing details she might have previously omitted. Even the smallest gestures, a shared coffee in the morning, a text checking in during the day, helped patch the invisible cracks in our connection. There were moments of tension, of course. Sometimes a glance at her phone would make my chest tighten, a reflex from the week's emotional whirlwind. But instead of letting panic take over, I paused, breathed, and reminded myself of the truth she had revealed. It wasn't easy. Every doubt felt like an echo, a reminder of how quickly uncertainty could consume me. We also had longer conversations, heart-to-heart talks about boundaries, transparency, and the ways we could prevent misunderstandings in the future. I realized that my own insecurities had fueled much of the spiral. By discussing them openly, I gave her insight into my fears, and she gave me reassurance and commitment. Gradually, the tension began to fade. Laughter returned to our evenings, not forced, but genuine. I started noticing the small joys I had overlooked. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the way she smiled when recounting a story from work. Trust wasn't instantly restored, but it was being rebuilt. Brick by brick. By the end of the week, I could finally relax a little, allowing myself to enjoy her presence without the constant background noise of suspicion. The experience had left its mark, a reminder of how fragile trust could be, but also of the strength of honesty, patience, and communication. I had survived the storm, and together, we were learning to navigate the calm that followed. Even after our long conversations and reassurance, a part of me couldn't fully shake the shadows of the past week. Sometimes, when she stepped out for a quick errand or picked up her phone, a tiny pang of doubt would creep in. I hated that I felt it, hated that my mind betrayed me with flashes of suspicion. Even though the truth was clear, I tried to confront these feelings rather than ignore them. I journaled late at night, writing down every thought, every fear, and then questioning it logically. I reminded myself of the envelope, the note, and her honesty during our confrontation. Slowly, I began to see that the shadows weren't evidence. They were echoes of my own anxieties, amplified by the week's tension. Yet, even recognizing that, the process wasn't instantaneous. Small triggers still set off brief waves of doubt, like a sudden text from a friend I hadn't met or a casual mention of Ethan. Each time, I forced myself to pause, breathe, and remind myself of the facts. I realized that trust wasn't about never feeling doubt. It was about choosing to act on evidence and communication, not fear. That week became a test of patience with myself. I had to learn that lingering shadows didn't mean failure. They were part of the human experience, part of rebuilding trust after uncertainty. Each small victory over fear, each moment I chose faith over suspicion, strengthened me and our relationship a little more. After the lingering doubts began to fade, we focused on reinforcing our connection. We set aside time each evening to share our thoughts, little details about our day, and even insecurities that might have gone unspoken. I learned to ask questions not out of suspicion, but from genuine interest, and she responded with openness that gradually calmed my lingering fears. That we started creating new routines together, morning walks, cooking dinner side by side, laughing at small mistakes, and celebrating minor victories. Each gesture, each shared moment became a brick in the bridge of trust we were rebuilding. Even a simple touch on the arm or a smile across the room carried reassurance beyond words. We also laughed about the chaos of the past week, how my imagination had run wild, how the photos had caused unnecessary panic, and how small misunderstandings had ballooned. Humor became a tool for healing, helping us release tension and reinforce our bond. By the end of this stage, I could feel the emotional distance that had grown during the week dissolve. The storm of doubt and fear was no longer constant. It had ebbed, replaced by a sense of security and connection. We weren't naive. We knew trust could be fragile, but we were committed to nurturing it together, step by step. Finally, the weekend arrived, and with it came a sense of calm that had been absent for far too long. Sitting together on the couch, sipping coffee, and laughing over a silly TV show, I realized how much weight had lifted from my chest. The fear, the doubts, the late-night spirals, they were still memories, but they no longer controlled me. That we spent the day reconnecting, intentionally creating moments of trust and joy. I noticed the little things, the warmth in her eyes when she smiled, the way she reached for my hand instinctively, the quiet assurance in her voice when she reassured me. These simple gestures carried more weight than any words could. Cementing the bond we had nearly lost to suspicion. That we also reflected on the week together, discussing how easily misunderstandings could escalate, how important communication and patience were, and how fragile trust could be if not nurtured. I apologized for letting doubt overshadow our relationship, and she forgave me, her forgiveness sincere and gentle. By the evening, we felt a renewed sense of partnership. The uncertainty that had haunted me had transformed into a deeper understanding of each other, a reminder that love required effort, honesty, and vulnerability. We had weathered the storm, and while the memories of fear lingered faintly, they no longer dictated our feelings. As we prepared for bed, I held her close, feeling the tension finally melt away. The past week had been a crucible, testing our bond in ways we hadn't anticipated. But emerging from it, we were stronger, more attuned to each other's needs, and ready to face whatever challenges life might throw our way. Together, the trust rebuilt, the fear replaced with confidence, and the love reaffirmed. I finally understood that moving forward wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about growing from it, learning to navigate uncertainty, and choosing each other every single day.